obviously genocide. And this is Article 2 of the Convention of the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, and it was done in 1948. And it defines genocide as any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, or racial genotype or religious group as such. Racial means genotype. That's where you get the word genocide. If you take a hair from a little white rabbit's head, you can tell what race they are. You can tell your genotype. If you go to local forensic pathologists, poor little white rabbit passed away, they could, just from a hair on his head, they can tell you what race you are. Of course, they may not want to admit race exists because they got to keep their job. But there's kind of a contradiction there based on the fact that we're in a closed society. And I'll go more into that. But basically, that's what genotype is. You can't try to destroy that. Why? Because in 1948, someone passed laws. They came up with all these international laws preventing that. And they include the killing the members of a group. That's A. B. Causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. C. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. It's a very, very important one. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. D. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. E. Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. These are all from 1948, and those are definitions we're going to be using. What you need to understand is that that's some pretty broad stuff, isn't it? Yes. You know, you're not going to see a fair tribunal. You're not going to see one. They don't exist. Saddam Hussein is not going to get a fair tribunal. There's no voting in a tribunal. There's no jury voting to indict. It doesn't work like that. It's non-voting politics. It's practical politics. Yeah, I mean, if you go in front of a grand jury, they're going to vote to indict or not indict. But you don't get a vote in a tribunal. They're not fair. Slobodan Milosevic did not get a fair tribunal. No, he didn't. Then probably innocent. But it doesn't matter once someone gets one going. Hopefully you understand that. I repeat that, it doesn't matter once someone gets going, whether you're innocent or not. You get called into tribunal for genocide, you're over with. You're done. They're going to hang you. Ethnic cleansing. A lot of people think they know the definition of ethnic cleansing, but they do not. The definition of ethnic cleansing as defined under the particular courts that this would be in is going to be rendering an area ethnically homogeneous by using force or intimidation to remove from a given area persons of another ethnic or religious group or basically race, genotype. Rendering an area ethnically or homogeneous by using force or intimidation. Most people think ethnic cleansing is when a lot of rabbits get wiped out. No, not necessarily. Most people think genocide is something, you know, you got to starve 30 million Ukrainians. No. An attempted genocide can basically put you in a tribunal. An attempted genocide where someone gets ethnically cleansed, you go in front of a secret panel, a panel of judges. Those judges issue ruling that there's been an attempted genocide and an ethnic cleansing. Then you go full tribunals. It's like Nuremberg. It's most of it done in secret, and then once it gets going, it's like for the world to see. But that's how that stuff works now. You saw a show trial for Slobodan Milosevic. You saw a show trial for Saddam Hussein. But there was other trials that preceded that. But there's no voting. There's not a jury. You don't get a jury. You get a handful of judges that were most likely picked for you. You get the picture. You get in front of a handful of Russian judges with a couple German judges in some part of Eastern Europe. You're in trouble. You're in trouble. They're going to get one going, and they'll get one going very quickly. Now, where can you find out any information about attempted genocide? Well, there's been a whole industry. Every single person listened to it. If you want to do your homework, there's a whole industry created off these quotes. Some of them, the ones that you can find out about. In fact, when you come into the Jewish groups running Anglosphere, who did a lot of the social engineering programs, their quotes are endless. Their quotes are endless. Yeah, Kevin McDonald wrote whole books about it. Their quotes all over Stormfront, direct quotes from Hebrew leadership about creating a blended humanity in only European countries, and so on and so forth. Every single one listening to this has heard some crazy anti-racist say, I want my race to go extinct, so on and so forth. Chad in Iowa is probably doing it right now. Why? Because it takes 15 years of psychological warfare, and they own Chad forever. He's done. Mentally, he's toast. But what you have to understand is common sense. Common sense to someone like me, I know immediately that someone had to also do that to the teachers, right? You got to have that going. You got to have those active measures in front of the teachers. You got to have the teachers teaching, which means you got to put it in the textbooks. You got to plan those textbooks. Psychological warfare, it takes a lot of planning, believe it or not. You got to have someone come up with those messages. You got to have the social engineering schools. Those take a lot of money. Someone's got to fund them. The Frankfurt School is famous, but there's others. Someone's got to fund that. Someone basically has to articulate a message at a very high level. Why? Because everything starts with a sound. Everything starts with a sound. Before your average rabbi can say something ridiculous and end up in a Kevin McDonald book, or before Chad in Iowa can call for the death of his race, someone has to articulate that at a very high level. Now, I knew that a long time ago. Well, what I did not know was what our side had. They had them articulating that at a very high level, over and over again, thousands of times. I mean, I've told you this, and discreetly, all you got to do is be on a consistent message. You can't go there under an international law, because heaven forbid you don't get your New World Order in the 80s or something, and it goes all the way, and it goes all the way into 2000 something, and the whole thing crashes on you. You're going to hang. You're not walking away. They're not going to walk away. It's just too juicy. You can't fund that. You can't have anything to do with that. The Jane Elliots, I've told you before, they're walking human rights violations. I don't think most of them have any idea what trouble they're in. People that's sitting in London that sit there and harass the little white rabbits, and they're all white by and large, they have no idea what trouble they're in. Some of their generals do. There's soldiers and there's generals. There's generals, lieutenants, and soldiers, as I say, those three. Well, the generals keep their lieutenants uninformed for the most part, and they keep their soldiers really uninformed. There's some generals very afraid. They've been very afraid for a long time for certain reasons. But it's been very blatant. It's been very in your face. To be that in your face, and again, most of them don't even realize. Jane Elliott will never realize with her blue eye, brown eye thing, how much danger she's in the right conditions. So those right conditions are coming right now. She's in a lot of danger. She's not in danger of someone dealing steel against her. She's in danger of a rope. Yeah, they have lists. Your side at the top has lists, believe it or not. My information is there's one list that goes well over 30,000 names, another list well over 50,000. But if you understand what I just told you about genocide, if you understand the parties involved and how they have no mercy once they get you down. I mean, you saw what happened to Saddam Hussein. They're not going to have any mercy. And that's not necessarily our side, but I'm giving you an example. There's no mercy in the tribunal. There's no voting. And now you understand why fear is in there. That's why I want you using genocide all the time. It's genocide. I've given you many ways to go about it, but it's very important that you understand that there's been an attempt at genocide against you. Did it work? No. But that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work. If you attempt to wipe someone out and get caught, it doesn't matter if you didn't succeed. That's not the law. So there are no social constructs under international law. Timothy Weiss does not understand that. He will learn that the hard way. There are no social constructs. Saddam Hussein will not say, oh, the Kurds were a social construct. They were all Iraqis. It doesn't work that way. They know that. There's certain elements of them that know that. Of course they're terribly afraid. You're going to be terribly afraid too. If you're a general and you know your name's on a list for funding something, because you can't fund that. You can't fund the Noel Ignatieff or whatever his name is at Harvard. I think it was funded by George Soros. He calls for the death of the white race and that kind of stuff. You can't go there, because what happens if you went there and 40 years ago, someone on tape at a high-level meeting, like a Bilderberger meeting or something, said we're going to wipe your race off the planet, and we're going to do it through immigration, so on and so forth and etc., and we're going to use our networks and our power. Next thing you know, you got all these countries, white countries and only white countries, everyone's flooding in. They've been a change in immigration laws without voting. What type of power would it take for China, Korea, and Japan to all of a sudden tomorrow morning open its immigration up to non-East Asian and only non-East Asian? Well, it takes a lot of power to do that without a vote.